Thank you so much for joining us today. We're very excited that you're all here to learn more about Veeam. Without further ado, I want to go ahead and introduce our speaker today. So Emily Torres, she is the Senior Systems Engineer for Veeam Software. She has 10 years of IT experience with over 7 years working directly for Veeam. She supports both commercial and public sector customers in the desert region. So that spans from New Mexico to Hawaii. She helps customers work on their data protection and disaster recovery strategies for the ever-changing modern data center. She's based in Mesa, Arizona, and is a graduate of Arizona State University, holds certifications in AWS, VMware, and Veeam.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And thanks everybody for taking some time today to join our webinar. So what's new with Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365? So today we're going to be talking a little bit about data protection strategies when it comes to Microsoft 365, as well as when it, kind of how do we create a higher availability strategy when it comes to leveraging different workloads within M365, like Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive, and our email data. Like previously stated, I'm Emily Tejas. So I've been with Veeam for about 7 years now. Based out here in Arizona. Absolutely love talking about this product, specifically because of the fact that it has been one of our fastest growing products in the market, just as we see a lot of customers start to adopt moving to M365 and really needing to maintain an additional set of backup, as well as a copy of that data set for longer term retention, as well as their own recovery strategies. So today we're going to talk a little bit about that market and adoption, and maybe what are some of those key reasons we see customers adopt M365 data protection. For some of the key features that were released with the newest version of version 6, there was something called the self-service restore portal, as well as doing an additional backup copy to low-cost object storage, so that way you could have a secondary copy of your backups. And then finally, we'll go through a quick demo as well as just a little bit of some Q&A. So first things first, so Microsoft M365, we'll go over the market overview. I do want to mention that we had a Veeam Conference last month. So that was hosted in Vegas. It was in person as well as online. If any of you had the chance to attend, it was really well attended, and they did some really great demos and overviews. But for those of you that weren't able to join, we still have all of those sessions recorded and available online. So feel free to go and register and go check out and see. There's a lot of really good demo sessions that go over M365 platform, talks about how end users are leveraging Veeam Backup for protecting those workloads today. But then it also talks about our future releases, as far as like leveraging Veeam Backup for Salesforce, for another SaaS application, talking about our cloud products with Azure, AWS, and Google, and then just our bread and butter product that everybody knows us for, which is Veeam Backup and Replication for on-premise VMware, Hyper-V, and AHV workloads. So definitely recommend go check out those sessions. They're already pre-recorded, so those are available for you to view at any moment in time. So we continue to see this to grow. I think we could all say, probably with the pandemic as well, that definitely hurdled things forward a lot faster for some end users when it comes to data adoption strategies for migrating to M365 and leveraging more SaaS-based products. And Veeam is the #1 provider of Microsoft 365. So when it comes to backing up these workloads, we continue to grow in that market. We have over 300 million 365 users, 250 million Teams users that are active, and over 200,000 Microsoft 365 downloads from our websites. So that's going to be just an additional growth that we continue to see in the market, right? So there's a lot of customers that are out there that are leveraging Veeam to back up and protect these workloads. When we look at eliminating the risk of losing access to M365 data, we're really talking about Exchange Online, SharePoint, OneDrive, and Microsoft Teams. I'll say those are going to be those big 4 core productivity applications that end users are using and are the most concerned about when it comes to having that data protected, as well as having a way to recover from that data if needed. Obviously, Microsoft has a lot of other different applications and platforms in there that, eventually, hopefully, we hope to be able to protect. But for right now, we have these four, which are going to be the main ones that we have direct APIs into that we can help to protect to make a secondary copy of those backups of data. So what are some of those reasons that we see customers wanting to protect M365 data? So usually it's around accidental deletion, or we see security threats as well as retention policy gaps, right? Having to make sure that we maintain data for backups or exchange email items for over 10 years, having to put those on litigation holds with the risk of somebody removing those litigation holds is just something that some of my customers, particularly in healthcare, just don't want to have an additional risk of. So that's where backups come in, right? We could do a secondary copy. It's off of Microsoft's environment, and it's something that we have that is protected, that we know can never be changed or erased or deleted unless we have the warrant to. Quickly restore individual M365 items and files. These are going to be leveraging the Veeam Explorers that we've had developed since Veeam version, I want to say version 7, version 8. So it's leveraging the Veeam Explorer for Exchange, for SharePoint, and then we created one for OneDrive as well as one for Teams. Those are all Explorers that Veeam has developed in-house that we own all the code data to. And we've just added that into our Veeam Backup for M365 product. So it's the trusted Explorers that if you've used Veeam Backup and Replication on-prem and you've gone through doing a restore of Exchange on-premise, it's the same type of recovery functionality, just recovering from M365 data. And then, of course, meeting legal and compliance requirements, right? Going back to that litigation hold, or going back to one of my other customers, examples of this, right, is they got requirements or asked from lawyers to go and retrieve a whole bunch of data or emails that were sent from a particular end user. Well, this is a way that they can kind of help give some of that back by giving the lawyer that self-service restore option to go through and search for some of the stuff. So being able to delegate depending on the types of workloads or the types of requests that you're getting, and based off of the personnel that are available, if you trust them to do that, right, can definitely help to lessen some of the workloads on the IT administrators that are having to go out there and not only support the deployment of M365, but also now support the recoveries, the backups of it, and protection. So continuing innovation with Microsoft 365. So this product actually was released in 2016. So 6 years of innovation we've seen. I would say that this is probably one of our fastest innovative products, from a sense of when we started to develop it and we actually released this product, it was free for all of our customers for the first year or two that they signed up. So it was something available just to protect data from Exchange Online only. So it did just that, right? We did backups of Exchange Online, and you could do your restores from within Exchange as well. Then we released 1.5. We added in some additional support capabilities. Version 2 came along, same thing, as well as version 3. I would say version 3 really kind of hit the stride with having a lot of features and functionalities that customers requested, as far as protection for OneDrive, SharePoint, but then changing the way that we work from a backups perspective to make those backups increase time a little bit faster and give you some additional visibility and analytics when it comes to some different reports that were available. And then, of course, version 4, version 5, and today we're on version 6. So again, right, we're currently continuing to innovate this product. The nice thing about it is that we actually have our own separate R&D team that only works on Microsoft 365 backup for Veeam. So it is not connected to Veeam Backup and Replication. So if you're not a Veeam Backup and Replication customer, doesn't matter to us. You can be a Veeam Backup for M365 customer. just by itself, or you can have both products. The beauty of this product is that it is ran solo, meaning that we could deploy it in multiple different locations. It runs off of its own console. It does its own form of backups, and it has its own security capabilities built into it for when it comes to managing that data, which I'll talk a little bit about. This is a recent poll that we took. So just kind of how does organizations we see back up their O365 data? Currently you would see here back in 2020, you can see there's quite a few that were not backing up their data or were under the impression that Microsoft was able to back up that data as well, or that it was protected. So in 2021, we could see a shift in the market to a lot more end users saying, actually, we now see that there is a gap when it comes to that data protection strategy with our applications running inside of a SaaS platform. And we definitely want to make sure that we have our own retention, our best practices in place, so that way we can recover from any type of data loss event that we might potentially have. Some of those risks as to why people are looking to protect their M365 data. I mean, accidental deletion is top of mind. I think I've heard this from the majority of my customers, especially the ones that are, just starting to go through your first migration, right? There's no better time to have a backup system in place when you're going through a migration, because that's usually when things start to go wrong. I've had one customer accidentally delete their production tenant account when they meant to delete the test tenant account. I've had customers accidentally delete a CIO's mailbox, and then as well as their calendar items. So then they had no way to rebuild the calendar for the entire year. So accidental deletion is very much a real thing, right? And it happens. Nobody is not going to be susceptible to it. It's just human error. And if we don't have a backup in place, or if we are relying on recycle bin, and of course we don't catch it within that recycle bin policy, well, now we just completely have loss of that data, right? And we've now larger that gap of far as how data is going to be available to us. Cybersecurity is definitely a huge risk, right? When we talk about phishing attacks or social engineering attacks, and people sending suspicious links inside of email, that's generally what I've seen for the most part as far as how malware has gotten into people's systems. There is a really great video on YouTube of one of the cybersecurity vendors actually showing how easy it was for him to create a social engineered attack where he actually acts himself as Microsoft, asking for a username password request, saying that they needed it. And you go in, you follow it, everything looks like it's a request from Microsoft. And then all of a sudden, he quickly finds all of his emails encrypted. So it's definitely a very real risk out there as far as cybersecurity goes. And then overall, the rest is just going to be around, all our internal needs, right? So get rid of the data loss perspective out of it. Let's just talk about, right now we have tools in place with Microsoft where we could do the restores, but it's not as easy to leverage, right? We have to do everything all at once. There's no easy way to navigate what it was that somebody might have deleted or lost. We're just looking for a better ease of use tool, so that way we can get finished with this request as quick as possible without having to spend too much time on it. So those are going to just be some of these additional risks that we see, or reasons that customers adopt M365. So the next part is the shared responsibility model. So this is something that I always love talking to customers about, because I think it's something that's usually a little bit glanced over if you weren't aware of it, right? So the shared responsibility model is simply this, right? There is ideally a customer perception that, Microsoft is just going to take care of everything. We moved all of our infrastructure, we moved all of our data up there, so that way we didn't have to manage that environment on-prem. Which is correct, right? Microsoft is going to be in charge of managing that infrastructure. But when it comes to your data, the actual emails that are being sent off, your SharePoint sites that you're creating, the OneDrive documents, the Teams chats, all of that data is going to be responsibility of you as the end user. So we have this reality of a split of who's going to be responsible for what. Microsoft really is just going to be in charge of the infrastructure, maintaining the uptime of their hardware, making sure that everybody has access and availability to it, whereas us as the customers are going to be responsible to the overall data. And if we need to protect that data for a longer term versus what Microsoft can provide for the 30 days, et cetera, then that's going to be up to us as the end user. This is actually inside of Microsoft's EULA agreement too. So if you ever had questions about it, or if anything ever got brought up from your CIOs or higher level directors as to, you know, why should we be backing this up if we just moved all of this to Microsoft? Why don't they just take care of it? There's actually going to be something inside of Microsoft terms and agreement that does say that if something were to happen, you had a malicious attack, or you had an accidental deletion or a data loss event, the recommended way to do a recovery is to use a third-party backup. So they actually call it out very specifically that they recommend using third-party backups because they do not want to be responsible for having to maintain that data. And it's a very, very tough situation when I've had customers that thought that Microsoft was going to take care of it for them, and they are all of a sudden, you know, lost tons of OneDrive files, and there was no way for them to get it back, or the portions that they received back were corrupted and pretty much unusable. So just again, right, some of those reasons that we want to see a lot of customers adopt a new reality of maintaining and protecting their own data. So when we look at the shared responsibility model, right, what's going to be the primary responsibility of Microsoft? What's going to be the responsibility of you as the customer? So Microsoft's responsibility, the infrastructure, right? We want to make sure that we have uptime of those data centers, that nobody's experiencing any slowness and speeds with accessing that data, that we have replicated or a copy that's going to be replicated to a different zone. So that way, if one data center was to go down, the other ones are highly available. So having that overall uptime of their services. When it comes to your responsibility, it's going to be having that full access and control of the data that's residing there, right? So if you have 300 users today and you had to go through a cleanup and there was 10 users that have left the company and you've now removed them from your M365 environment, but maybe you accidentally removed the wrong person and they needed to come back up, but you've done a hard deletion of that. There's no way to recover that without having to recreate a brand new user, right? So that's where an option of having a backup in place definitely helps to provide to give you back some of that data. Supporting technology. So I mentioned this earlier, having that data center geo redundancy. The one thing that I do like to point out, right, is the redundancy portion doesn't mean that it's going to be secondary or multiple copies. It's a single copy of your data. So if we go back to that malware or through a security talk, right? If something was to happen to an original user's account or somebody was to get access to something and that data was now corrupted, let's say we had that end user that clicked on the suspicious link and all their emails were encrypted. Well, that was now replicated to this other site, right? So regardless on being able to recover that data, what's good to recover the data if it has been encrypted, right? So just keep in mind here, it's a single copy of data. It's not a secondary copy. It's not air-gapped. It's not offsite. It's just a single copy of that data. And if it's been changed, if we've had deletions, if we have corruptions in it, it is replicated to that other one. So again, having that secondary copy of data via a backup, being kept off-site, being stored at a different location where you control the retention policy, you control what items and users are getting backed up is going to be a really strong way to protect any type of data loss. So recycle bins, I see a lot of my customers leveraging this to as their data restore policy, right? So using short-term data loss recovery, it's very limited. You have 30 days before something becomes hard deletion, whereas with Veeam, you get that full data retention. You determine what type of policy you want to have in place. If you're going to keep data for an additional 90 days, which is going to be outside of Microsoft, or if it's going to be up to a year, or for some of my healthcare customers, up to 10 years, right? We have those backups. We have them being stored somewhere else, and it's 10 years and it's off maybe cheaper storage that we are already managing or that we already hold ourselves. So it's not continuing to grow within the M365 environment. And then overall, just general security, which I already kind of talked about this, right? Both internal accidental deletions as well as things like ransomware and malware. And then when it comes to regulatory rules, right? So making sure that we have the data, the items available when it comes to legal and or compliance requests. Right? Again, going back to that original customer that had a request from the lawyer to go and collect any emails that were sent from a specific user account for these date ranges. That was something that they had to do. It was hard for them to accomplish that in M365. It was easier for them to use that within their backups and being able to search across those mail items. So let's get into a few of the new different features that were added on to version 6. So first is new self-service restore portal. So this was a highly requested feature since the beginning of version 1, which is we don't want to have to perform all the restores for our end users. It would be nice if we could give some of that power back to them, especially if they're end users that we trust, or if we're going to relay that to, an IT help desk admin, so that way we can lengthen the burden off of our ticketing system of having to perform so many restore requests for emails or for OneDrive. So the nice thing about it, right, is that it is going to be scalable within your organization. So we have this was originally built for our service providers, which is Veeam's cloud service provider platform. So we have thousands of service providers there that help protect over 10,000 of mailboxes per day, right? So we built this to help them to have a way to create self-service restore portals, but we've just announced it and made it available for all of our end users that aren't using that platform. So being able to give that power and control back to your end users to do their own restores if they needed to is definitely going to save you some time, as well as it gives you some enhanced security, because it does require MFA in order to access and restore the data. Now, the first question I always get asked is, well, if my user can log in, can they see everybody's emails? Because now we're looking at a breach of security, right? And the answer is no. When we use these self-service restore portals, the benefit is that when an end user logs in underneath their MFA to restore access to data, it only allows them to see their own data. So they would only have access to see the restores for their mailbox as well as their personal SharePoint site. They do not get access to everybody else's mailbox inside of the environment. It's going to be a very limited restore scope depending on the independent user. So it's going to provide a centralized location to efficiently divide your guys' restore permissions across the organization, right? And again, allowing you to provide access to perform those restores without having someone have full access to that Veeam backup for O365 server. When we look at the possible recovery options, and I actually love this slide because it just shows the abundance of ways that we can recover different types of data, right? You have Exchange Online, we have Microsoft Teams, OneDrive, SharePoint. These are all those 4 explorers, or I guess, yeah, 4 explorers that I mentioned earlier that are going to be automatically installed. From an installation perspective, this takes less than 30 minutes. I mean, I set this up last week with a customer, and we installed it, went through updates, created, added in their M365 tenant account, set up their object storage bucket that they were going to be writing to for a backup, set up the retention policy, and then created our first backup job for SharePoint. And we did that all within 30 minutes. So, I mean, it really doesn't take too long. Depending on, if you're paying attention to it and you're looking at it while it's loading, right? Otherwise, I've had customers that just kind of let it go and then come back to it and work on it as you see fit. But it's really simple and easy to use. But the benefit there is that you get so much power and flexibility to do all these restores with a very, very simple installation. So the Veeam backup for M365 product can be installed on premise. It can be installed in the cloud. We actually have AMIs available of Veeam backup for M365 inside of the Azure Marketplace. You could also deploy this in the AWS Marketplace. And then the other thing that I'm going to mention later on is that this can actually write directly to cloud storage or object storage. So it doesn't have to write to on-premise storage locally or to block disk. It could actually write direct to object storage, where we see a lot of our customers adopt that philosophy, right? We want to take it outside of Azure's ecosystem, so maybe write it to AWS or write it to another S3 cloud provider that we generally like. But with that, you get all these different types of restores available with those explorers that come installed automatically. So restoring a single email item from your Exchange inbox all the way down to restoring an entire SharePoint site. So tons of different options for these restore capabilities that are available to you. Just comes down to what type of data you're looking to recover after any type of data loss event. So here's the self-service configurations. So we have two different options you could choose from. You have a self-service for users and you have a self-service for restore operators. Self-service for users, again, is just giving delegated access to the users within your company that you trust to perform their own restores of their personal Exchange Online, SharePoint, and OneDrive items themselves. So they would simply log into the self-service restore portal. It's going to be a version of the M365 tenant name plus Veeam backup of M365. It'll do two-factor authentication, make sure that that's going to be the person that has the correct access to it using Microsoft. And then from there, all that's going to load is their access to the original Veeam backup of Exchange Online, SharePoint, and OneDrive. Self-service for restore operators is a little bit different. This is designed to help, again, with if you want to give this right to a service desk or help desk organization. Maybe we don't trust some of our end users inside of our environment to perform their own restores because they have the tendency to recover everything. And when you have somebody that has a mailbox that's 10 gigs in size because they've been with the company for so long and they decide they want to recover it all back, that's a ton of data in Microsoft's terms, right? So being able to kind of manage that and pick and choose who's going to have access to perform those restores gives you that option to do the restore operator role. So you have a defined set of users, they have specific rights to different objects, and they can perform their own restore of those items. Again, limiting access, right? We don't want them to have access to go and look at a CIO's mailbox or CFO or CEO. Those can all be limited to just the admins themselves, the actual admins of the M365 product, versus the help desk teams that are going to be doing just general restores for anybody else within the company. So user access to self-service restore portal, it authenticates via Microsoft. From there, we have a self-service API token. It's going to go through and get sent and confirm those REST APIs. And then Veeam backup for M365 is going to grant access to the authorized restore operations for the users. So depending on that token and what rights are going to be available, that's going to be what's available for them to see to perform those restores at that scale for the operator level. So M365 data, we're seeing that being held for longer, right? So when we start talking about retention policies and practices and things of that nature, we definitely seen an uptick of customers saying, okay, well, we keep the 10-year retention policy on-prem for email. We need to do the same thing, but we don't want to keep 10 years worth of data inside of M365 that's going to be running off of production, right? So how can we maintain that data for longer terms, but be able to scale it out and have full control over it? So these are just different retention mandates that we're seeing across different organizations, depending on how they're looking to protect their M365 environment. Again, the 7 to 10 years, we really see that in healthcare. For the most part, I have seen 3 years be the most generally used for end users needing to keep data for at least 3 years within their backups. So that introduces our new backup copy to low-cost object storage. So why backup copy? Well, an extra copy of your backup is going to give you not only just a general peace of mind, right? We have a secondary copy, so that way if the first copy or our original backup was to be deleted or had an issue, whatever that may be, we have the secondary copy that isn't going to be predisposed to that same type of error outage. For those of you that are familiar with Veeam backup replication, we always talk about the 3-2-1-1-0 rule, or we call it the backup zip code, which is having 3 copies of data, 2 different media types, 1 kept offsite for disaster recovery strategies, and then 1 being air gapped, and then that provides 0 errors. So it's the same idea. We're just presenting that for our M365 data now. So having that secondary copy of your backups that can help you to save money, because we're going to write it to lower cost storage, also gives us that additional air gap, or what I like to call data separation, right? We have an additional intermediary in between the original backup. So if something were to happen to that, somebody was to delete it or make a change, this one is not affected. And again, just mastering that 3-2-1 rule, but now mastering it for all of our M365 services. So when we talk about low-cost object storage, what we're really talking about is Amazon S3 Glacier, Glacier Deep Archive, and Azure Archive. Those are going to be the 3 archive object cloud providers that are going to be low cost when it comes to the overall storage amount, but then it's going to allow you to have that redundancy of that copy. The nice thing is if you do have, like, let's say, for example, I have a lot of customers that write to Wasabi as a backup vendor. So they're using them as their S3 object. And now you want to have a secondary copy. We can take that secondary copy and we could write that to Amazon. We could write that to Azure. We could write that to Deep Glacier. That's just going to give you that additional copy of those backups being sent somewhere else to another cloud provider. So if something were to happen to your Wasabi object bucket, you have another copy being sent somewhere else. And then the same thing goes for Amazon, right? We're writing to just Amazon regular S3 and we want to send a copy of it to S3 Glacier. Perfect. Same thing for Azure, we're writing to Azure Cool Cold Storage. Now we want to write to Azure Archive. We have another copy of it, gives us that additional redundancy. So how this looks like. So we have our Veeam backup for M365 product that could be installed again on premise. Probably my favorite installation of it is doing a virtual machine or a physical server on-prem. So that way you can leverage CPU and RAM resources that you've already invested in to deploy this product. And then when it comes to the actual backups itself, you guys aren't going to get hit for any egress charges. So the way that Veeam connects to your M365 tenant is we use a bunch of third-party APIs within Microsoft. So we're going to use the web API, we're going to use Graph. That's going to allow us to connect to this tenant. And we do something called like an impersonation role where we act like we're a user that's just going through and looking at emails and looking through SharePoint, looking at OneDrive. The benefit there is that this prevents you from having to be charged with any egress because we're just impersonating a regular user. When it comes to the data transfer, now let's say, okay, well, we want to have this data write to object storage, and maybe that object storage isn't on-prem, it's somewhere else. Well, that is going to go through your circuit, that's going to go through your own network, but Microsoft is notorious for throttling. So usually what I see with customers is we get a terabytes worth of data process in every 10 to 12 hours. So that's like kind of the best case as far as numbers go. So if you're thinking about that from a sense of, oh, well, are we going to have any bottlenecks, or are we going to have this product that's going to be just chewing up our bandwidth? No, not necessarily, because we're going to be limited to what Microsoft is going to throttle us to. So your first backup is going to take the longest. However, once we do our first full, we'll never have to do another full again. So it's something that we call as a forever forward backup, where once we've captured all of that data inside of the full backup, everything moving forward is going to be treated as an incremental. Even if you add a brand new user inside of your account, they're going to be seen as an incremental user that we're going to be backing up the very, very first time. We could also back up to on-premise local storage, so that could go to block storage as well. But for most customers, I've seen big benefits of just going direct to object storage, so that way you can get that data off premise, but then also being able to kind of control the CPU and RAM resources here. And then we'll do that backup copy. So it's another job that would be set up here to just copy the backups that have been stored, whether that's on-premise or in the cloud, and copy that off into the long-term object storage bucket of your choosing. And then from a restores perspective, restores are available from both options, right? If we're going to restore from our long-term backups, great, multiple recovery options with those 4 explorers. If you're going to recover from the on-premise options, same thing. It's going to be the same explorers that you'd use to do the recoveries, just different retention policies. So customers I've seen do about maybe 90 days on object storage, but then they keep 4 years of it sitting inside of Amazon Glacier. Again, different ways of retention policies depending on how your organization deems the data loss gap can be as far as recoverability speeds go. Other features in version 6, so recovering SharePoint to other locations, to other site collections, another organization or tenant. I really like this one because I do have customers that run different tenants, one for their R&D, or not R&D, but more for their DevOps side. And I've always gotten asked this question, well, it would be great if something was to happen in production, if we were able to just grab the one that we were working on inside of our other organization and do a restore there, right? So just some additional features and options there that were added on with version 6. And then multi-geo support, right? If you're a large organization, a large enterprise organization that has headquarters in EMEA or APAC or these different countries, and you have multi-geo support turned on with M365, just know that we could support those Exchange, SharePoint, and OneDrive items when it comes to leveraging that multi-geo infrastructure. And then these are just some overall minor features, right? There's a new installer window. We have that RESTful API call for our VCSP providers. And then just support for SharePoint Online renames of their domains. So nothing too crazy there as far as those minor features go. These are just going to be some additional updates that they made to the actual product itself. Overall, this is just what we hear back from customers that have used and loved our product. Overall, I think we've had some pretty good feedback in the marketplace. Again, one of our fastest growing products, and I think for good reason, as we start to look at the overall SaaS model and how customers begin to adopt that platform and being able to have that full control and ownership of your data. So just a few things before we wrap it up. So there's just some quick take actions or key takeaways. So I'll warn everybody now, get your QR code scanners ready. But if you guys want to read up more on this, right? So there's a really great conversational book online, scan the QR code here. And it talks all about Teams backup, right? Why backup Teams? Why is that important? Well, how do we do recoveries of this data and how do we need it? So really great one to go over as far as Teams data goes. There's a technical guide for how does M365 work. So this kind of walks you through setting up Microsoft Veeam Backup for M365 as far as the installation, creating up a backup job, key differentiators for deciding on what types of retention policies you would like. So one big thing in there is we do 2 different types of retention. You could do an item level or you could do a snapshot based. The benefit there is if you are a city, county, or government entity that really wants to enforce an SLA policy on your end users, and you say, we only keep data for a year, and that's in Microsoft as well as part of our backups, you can enforce that policy where Veeam will only back up the data items that have been marked within that 1-year time frame, and we skip anything else from being processed. So it doesn't life cycle the data inside of Exchange. It just gives our product that absolute full control to make sure that if you have a hard SLA for items and data recovery, you can make sure that those item level retention policies are set based off of what Veeam's actually going to back up. And then just a general snapshot based retention policy, which is, hey, capture everything based off of whatever's in their mailbox. I don't care if there's email items in there that are 3 years old at this point. If it's in there, we back it up. we need to be able to recover it if they ask for it. So just differences inside of that kind of go over it in a little bit more so of a deep dive. And then, of course, there's a trial key, right? Trial key available on the Veeam website. You can download it free for 30 days. You can install this on-prem. Again, I mentioned that we do have an AMI of this available on the Azure Marketplace. So I believe it is updated to version 6 last time I checked. So you can deploy this as a Azure virtual machine within the Azure Marketplace. It actually tells you what we recommend as far as the Azure VM size. And from there, it goes through the entire installation of the product for you. And then you just need to connect your tenant, pick the object bucket that you want to write your backups to, which would be assuming that's going to be Azure Object Storage. Once you create that bucket, you attach it, and then Veeam would do everything, and it's fully deployed inside of the cloud. So just different options there. Again, from a resources perspective, the trial keys are available for 30 days, unlimited users, but on the Azure website, I want to say you get up to 10 users for free. So if you just wanted to test this out, run it for 10 users, or if that's really all you need to be able to protect inside of your organization, you do get full functionality to the product for up to 10 users for free of charge.
We do. Yeah, thank you so much, Emily. That was extremely informative. So I do have, my first question is from Matt, and he says, because this is a separate product, does it allow us to use our tape infrastructure that we use with our Veeam system? Can you explain a little bit more about that?
So unfortunately, this product cannot write to tape. So the way that Veeam backup for M365 works is it's not a true or a traditional backup file. So in Veeam backup and replication, how we take our backups, we do the snapshot within VMware or shadow processing within Hyper-V, but we store that backup as a .bbk or a flat file, which allows us to be very portable with that backup file. With M365, it's not a flat file. It's actually a Jet database. So when we do our backups of Exchange Online, SharePoint, Teams, OneDrive, we're actually creating a Jet database that's going to live on the object storage bucket or on the block storage that you have on premise. And that Jet database is going to be continuously updated, as well as create redirects and directories for us to perform our restores from. So because it's a living database, we have no way to get that off onto tape, which is where the secondary option comes in to want to maintain those backups for a longer time as far as keeping a longer term retention. Well, we could offload that data onto Glacier or to Azure Archive or Deep Glacier. So those would be the options for getting that long-term data retrieval off. Will tape become an option in the future? Possibly. I know that they're in talks about that, but we have not yet heard anything else as far as what they're planning to release with version 7. We plan to know a little bit more late July, as that's when we do our big tech expo for all of our internal SEs.
Excellent. All right. And guys, if you have any other questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. We're going to keep going. We've got a few extras as well. How is the product licensed, Emily?
Yeah. So licensing for this product is a little bit different, right? We're actually going to license it per user, and I'll say per human user. So if you have shared mailboxes or resource mailboxes, things of that nature, we don't care about those. We'll actually give you those licenses for free. All Veeam cares about is how many active E3, E5 users do you have in your organization, or E1 licenses that you're looking to protect, right? So those human users that have mail items that are coming in, that are active on SharePoint, that are active in Teams, those are going to be what we would license. We license those per one user. I want to say the pricing is pretty comparable. It like almost comes down to like less than $2 per month or something of that nature. And you get a bundle of 10. So you buy one pack, it comes inside of a bundle of 10 for 10 users. And then as you scale and grow, you can add those users or you can remove those users. It is a subscription. So again, if you start with 900 and you grow to 1200 next year, then you would just add on those additional 1200, or we could drop down if we need to drop those down. So those would be some of those options that you'll have available to you.
Excellent. All right. And the next one, so why would we want backup copy jobs of our 365 data? Isn't just a backup good enough?
Yeah. So again, really great question, right? It's going to come down to all of our individual users and what their backup retention policy is going to come down to, right? So again, going back to a customer that is in healthcare, they generally have data retention policies that have them have to maintain data for 7+ years. Keeping that on higher production storage and M365 is going to cost them quite a bit of money. Doing that in object storage will cost them less money, but if they're really looking at terms of burden as far as how can we relieve the amount of cost that this is going to have us for keeping that many years of retention, that's where that backup copy comes into place. Being able to have that secondary copy stored on longer term storage that's at a slightly smaller difference of a cost is definitely going to help. But then also just giving you that overall data protection strategy. If we have a 3-2-1 rule, something happens to that production data, something happens to the original backup, we have a secondary copy that is unaffected.
Well, thank you all for coming. Emily, excellent job. This was very informative.
All right, thank you, everybody.